too many of them that can handle me. But I might let you try it off the Hennessy. Make them sing to this thing.
Hello. Welcome to the next transmission as we lead into the piggy bank. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Stefania. I see some familiar faces, which I'm excited about, but then also some unfamiliar faces. So if you haven't noticed, this particular program, this frequency is like very young, jovial, like peak 2012 ridiculousness. I'm talking trucker hats, Von Dutch vibes. And what's funny is that the reason it is that way is because back between like 2008 to 2012, there was a period of time where culturally money was exciting. That it didn't matter where you were in the world, there was this like relationship to like this idea of what it meant to be wealthy. It was all in the music. And what was funny is that if you look at how music was portrayed in that era, in that 2008 to 2012 time, being wealthy looked fun and exciting and like worthwhile to pursue. And then something happened. Something happened and we all got jaded. Maybe because we grew up a little bit. The truth is we didn't actually grow up. The truth is that who we were between that time period was that we just forgot. We forgot that being wealthy is not supposed to be a task. It isn't supposed to be a to-do. It's not supposed to feel like work. It's just supposed to be this experience of living life. So what does it actually mean to be wealthy? Well, in North American terms, wealthy means that you have some sort of fuck you money in the bank, that you could leave your job and nothing matters and you can afford whatever the hell you want. But I don't teach wealth that way. I teach wealth as a reflection of how you can afford to live your life, not the life prescribed to you by your parents. Not the life you think you should want because that's what you believe, nor even the life that culturally everyone tells you that is yours to have if you're wealthy, but your life. But when I actually ask you, what does your life look like wealthy, it's really hard to peel away from culture, from society, from ancestry, because you'd have to have enough audaciousness to say it's my life and I don't care. You would have to have the kind of arrogance that a teenager has. A teenager who acts like they know it all, even though they might not. And the truth is that most of us are still ashamed of that part. So whether you're here live with me or you are watching the replay, I want you just to take a moment and really think about how much work you've been doing with your inner teenager in comparison to how much work you do with your inner child. Our inner child gets a lot of attention. And then we wonder why we still have this like angst and upset and irritation that like boils underneath our skin. Because in the midst of trying to take care of our inner child, we totally ignore the teenager. The teenager's got to fend for themselves. The teenager's got to learn the value of $1. The teenager is the reason why my life sucks. The teenager is the reason why my relationships don't work out. We blame the teenager for everything. It is the perfect scapegoat. But unfortunately, it's also the key component to our financial wounding. We work a lot with the inner child, but the inner child has no fucking clue about what's going on with money, nor should they. The teenager is the one who becomes disillusioned with the world. It becomes faced with the fact that its idea of money is not the reality of it. Not the reality they were born into anyways. And then rather than seeing that the reality they were born into is a game, they're taught that this is the way life works. So they create these rules for operating. These rules for making money, these rules for how you spend money. And usually it stems from one of two things. I'm going to either rebel against my parents or conform with what I think will make me better off than them. So it really doesn't matter if you grew up with money or not, because we are all wounded at our teenage years around it. And this is one of the things that if you look out in the world, you'll see that everybody thinks that they've got it worse off. You didn't grow up like I did when I was 16. So therefore, you don't have the same woundings. It's like, you're right. They don't have the same woundings, but they still have a gaping hole in their chest, okay? Maybe not from the same weapon, but it's still there. And so this work is not about, for lack of better terms, a pissing contest of the Oppression Olympics. It's about understanding that where you were in your life is a vantage point. And no one else has lived that life when you were 16, 17 years old, and no one else was experiencing what you were experiencing, which makes you uniquely qualified to live your life. And that's why your wealth is unique and independently determined. There is no one who can tell you what wealth looks like to you, how it should feel, all the components of it, because your life has your vantage point. And until you accept what it is, I'm not going to be able to guide you through it. So this conversation right now is really stemming around this concept of spiritual adolescence. And the reason why I call it spiritual adolescence is because, unfortunately, all that wounding that happens when we're 16, 17 doesn't grow. It like holds us there. And then even though we're moving on into our later 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s and 80s, surprisingly, we still operate as though the life that we live is the same as when we were 16. That what we're trying to survive at 17 is still very real today. So if you are someone who went through a lot of trauma during that period, it's very hard to see your adult life and be like, yeah, but like, listen, look at what I had happen to me at 16. It's really hard to separate those two. Yeah. See, spiritual adolescence is what happens is when you grow up, you physically age, but you emotionally and spiritually do not. And the reason why you don't is because your teenager is still operating like they have to survive life. And it doesn't matter if your version of survival was social survival. I need to fake like I'm wealthy so I fit in. Doesn't matter if it was physical survival. I need to work harder than anybody so I could help my mom put food on the table. Any survival is taxing. There is no, this is a harder survival or not. It is just taxing, period. And we need to have a little bit of grace for what everyone tried to survive at 16. Because at that time, it was the most important. It was the only thing you could focus on. See, spiritual adolescence, I have such grace for, mostly because I'm an immature little brat, but I have a lot of grace for it because it's essential. Because it's also the phase of discovery. It's the phase of disillusionment. It's the phase of excitement. It's the phase of extreme emotion. I have such reverence for the teenage phase of your spiritual and personal development. And at the same time, I also have a lot of heartbreak around it because how many of you have actually allowed your inner teen to have fun? How many of you are trying to make her grow up? Sneaky, isn't it? We don't tell our inner child to grow up, but our inner teen we're telling to be more mature. You need to grow up. You need to understand the value of $1 and then wonder why our money doesn't work. Because we just reinforce the wounding that was created in our real life. So we want you to take a look at what did you decide was true about money. And if you're watching the replay or if you're joining me live, I want you just to take out a pen, journal, and write, what did you decide about money? Throughout your entire adolescence, it might start at 12, 13. It's mostly about the 14-year-old age because now you actually want things. By the time you hit 15, you actually understand, you probably have a good firm understanding of how much the things you want cost. And if you don't know what they cost, then that's something to look at, right? But what belief did you create around money during your adolescent years? And the context of which your life took place may have a massive impact on that. And that's okay too. I want you to take a moment and also recognize that what you believe about money may be a little bit scary to admit because it is in high contrast to what you were actually raised to believe. And that's okay too. Okay. I created a belief that money is hard. It doesn't come easy. Right? Money is always there to be made, but I have to work hard, spend a lot of time working to have it. Yeah. I'll wait for a couple more people to share theirs. Money was my freedom from doing what I wanted, aside from my parents. Yeah. There's never enough money. Money is what really matters. I have to work X type of job to make the kind of money I need to survive to make my father proud. Yep. But there was never enough to have what I really wanted. I had to compromise to have less. Now here's the real question I have. Who wants to acknowledge that that is still the belief that's running them today? Right? And it started when you were a teenager. How we haven't looked at the teenage phase in relationship to money is beyond me. Everyone's like, oh, you need to do the belief work. It's like, okay, but like when you were 17 years old, you straight up believed I need to earn money to make up for fucking up. Right? I fucking love money and nice things and desire them so hard, yet my family and wanting more, the more than I had meant I was greedy. So I had to sneak and lie about what I wanted. Right? Your belief system, the relationship you have to money is still adolescent. I don't know about you guys, but like, I don't want to date the same kind of men that I dated when I was 16. I don't want the same kind of relationships I had at 16. And it's no shame to the girl that I was at that age, is that she didn't know enough about life. She always made do with what she had because our teenagers are meant to learn what it is to survive. But that's it. They're just meant to learn it, not live it daily. Right? I had to learn that you have to hustle in order to have money and that there's never enough and that you have to work hard to make a lot of money. Yeah. So we all have this orientation. I got to work hard. I got to work hard to make money. Now, how many of you rebelled against that? You're like, well, fine, then fuck you money. I don't want to make money. If I have to work hard, fuck you. From a belief you created at 16. A under-resourced teenager who does not have the fathomability of what life entails created a rule that you are still operating by, right? It's laughable to me now because I was also that teenager. Obviously, I wouldn't be teaching this if I wasn't. But when I was a teenager, I worked from the moment I could because I knew that come Christmas and my birthday, my parents weren't going to be able to afford the things I actually wanted. And so I asked my mom and dad for things that I knew they could afford and that were staples. Like I remember asking my mom for a bra and a new pair of socks because I needed those things. And if they were going to buy me a gift, it made more sense to buy the thing that I was going to need anyways. But the things that I actually wanted, I went and got myself. I saved my money, and I would blow it. Save my money, blow it. Save my money, blow it. And then eventually I started to learn how to get a credit card and student loans. Save my money, blow it. Save my money, blow it. Oh, but now I have a credit card. So blow it, blow it, blow it, blow it. I maxed out my credit card all the time. But the thing is I started to get scared because suddenly the extra money that I would make that I used to give to my mom to help pay for bills, I wasn't doing anymore because I was in school. A year into my university degree, my mom called me to ask me for a loan. My heart broke. See, in the midst of my inner teen saying, I got to save money and buy what I want, simultaneously, my inner teen was also developing this savior complex, that the responsibility is on me to take care of my family. Yeah, that's an unfortunate reality, but guess what? I'm not the only one with that reality. But when I got into university, I actually realized how much that didn't work. Because I had been spending my whole high school life trying to save my family, and they're still not saved. And here I am in university trying to change the color of my collar. So then maybe I won't end up as trailer trash. And I shit you not, that was the belief system I had. I worked so hard that I got 2 other jobs. I maxed out whatever was left on my line of credit to give to my mom. And she always was good for it. She said, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back. And it was always some grace of God. She would end up paying me back like somebody died. And I got blood money inheritance to pay back the loans that I gave her. There was something always off about it. And I hated it. And I didn't know what to do about it because I also didn't have boundaries. So flash forward, now I'm 22 years old. My mom's still asking me for money. I've been working 3 jobs. I'm maxed out on my lines of credit. I'm fucked. And thank God for my grandparents who would give me boxes of food because I didn't know how I was going to make everything happen until I landed myself in psychosis in a psych ward. Stressed out, burnt out, thinking that I was going crazy because I was going through like a psychotic collapse. Keeping in mind that a teenager was the one who was just trying to do whatever it took. The most resilient part of me is the part of me that it shouldn't be old enough to be resilient. The most resilient part of you is the part of you that should have never been required to be resilient. But that's kind of the fucked up beauty of it. Your inner teen was not required to live the life that she was given, but she lived it fully. Took on whatever they needed to, took on whatever decisions they could, and doesn't matter what traumas came along with that, they did the very best that they could. But at what point do you decide that I'm tired of making a teenager be resilient in this life and I'm actually ready to take care of them? See, spiritual adolescence, while beautiful, is also a huge marker that your adult is missing. That at some point, your inner adult, this exalted version of you, your highest self, isn't driving the bus of your life. That you're still giving this learner's permit 16-year-old the reins and not saying, hey, that's not your job. It is not your job to worry about the roof over our head. It is not your job to worry about the food in our belly. It is not your job to save people. It is not your job to hold people accountable. It is your job as a teenager to go have fucking fun, to fuck up, to learn, to discover, to decide you really like candy, and then a week later being like, oh, I'm never doing that again. It is your job to go through extremes of life. Go get drunk, realize you want to be sober, go fuck up, get clean, do all of the things, and I've got you. I've got you even when your heart breaks, and I've got you even when you fuck up, because there's nothing you could do to have me abandon you ever again. And I understand I've abandoned you thus far. I understand that I've let your belief systems control our life when really I am here to take care of you. It is not a teenager's responsibility to take care of the rest of you. Because what happens when you have a 16-year-old who never gets to have any fun, who's constantly stressed out about money, who's constantly stressed out about their future and being asked to make future decisions, really big adult decisions. And then you are just got your attention on your inner child. What's that like? I don't know about you, but I got hella resentful. Like, when's my turn? When's my turn to rest? So about 2.5 years ago, I was going peak spiritual adolescence. Also, doesn't help, I was going through my Saturn return. Yeah. This like peak pinnacle moment of like growing and maturity. And I hit this spot that I've hit 1,000 times in my life, where I was raging upset that I just collapsed on my floor. And I realized, I was like, my parents are never going to get it together. And I'm an only child, so it felt like a burden. The moment you feel like your parents are a burden, you know something's off. And I got to this realization that it didn't matter how hard I worked, that I was always going to have to work so much harder. Because I also needed to prepare for my parents' death. This is a big topic, and I understand that. So, feel free to share as we go in the comments. But there was this really sobering, maturing moment when I realized that this young part of me that is angry and upset was also fighting the reality that I actually had to be responsible for. See, this younger part of me was like, fuck you, mom and dad. You should have done better. You should have figured out your retirement plan. You should have figured out how you were going to afford the funeral. Why the fuck is this my responsibility? And I was so pissed off. And then this other part of like, it actually doesn't matter how upset I am. The truth is I'm going to have to prepare for their death. And yeah, they're about 30 years away from that, at least. The very least. My dad probably a little longer because he's a young little fella, spring chicken. But it didn't matter how this young part felt. This was still the reality. See, the other side of the teenager is that they're stuck in a fantasy. They're in the process of becoming disillusioned, of starting to see reality for what it is. But to take care of that side of you, to not let it be jaded and distort your future, but to simply see reality, acknowledge it, and respond to it. That is what responsibility is. You cannot respond to the reality you're in if you do not see the reality. That is why teenagers are responsible for learning responsibility. It is natural to be disillusioned and then respond. It's natural to be disillusioned and have responsibility. That is the process. Responsibility is nothing more than responding to the reality you're in. But the teenager doesn't want to respond to the reality because it believes that that's going to require more from it. There was no part of me that wanted to acknowledge that I'm actually going to have to financially support my parents' funerals. My inner teen wanted to sit in the delusion that maybe my parents would get it together, that maybe if I just kept supporting them in these little ways, they would feel more empowered, whatever. It was all of the delusion she was running about what it meant to be wealthy and happy and successful, about how life was going to work, that she needed to fight against the reality that I still needed to address. That wasn't going to change, and it didn't matter how hard she fought it. When I look out into the world, all I see is a bunch of teenagers getting really upset at the realities that they have to respond to. This anti-capitalism movement, I laugh at every time because it's like, you're an entrepreneur, bro. You need that. What you hate is anti-commercialism, which is the exploitation of resources. And the reason why you hate that is because you were an exploited teen. All teenagers are exploited. Learn the value of $1. Meanwhile, work a job you're not allowed to practice boundaries in. You need to study hard. Meanwhile, sacrifice your body not sleeping so you could study, to maybe get a scholarship, to maybe go to the university, to maybe get a better job. Not even the job you want, but it's a better job than the ones your parents had. Right? Forgetting that you're not teenagers anymore. Spiritual adolescence is when you stay stuck instead of allowing yourself the process of being disillusioned, of seeing the reality, and allowing your adult to step forward and say, hey, thank you for seeing the reality, and I've got you. I've got the response to this reality. You're responsible for seeing it. I'm responsible for responding to it. That's it. If your inner teen is angry and upset about the fact that you've got to put in some kind of service to receive financial funds, fighting that isn't going to help your life any. But for your inner teen to be like, oh, I've got to serve something to receive money, acknowledge that. But then your adult step forward and say, hey, that's cool because I've got the service. I'm here to serve. I'm here to receive the money. You are here to be taken care of. And how I'm going to take care of you is I'm going to let you go have fun. That when I serve this energy and I receive this money, that I'm going to use some of that money to take us to Six Flags. That I'm going to use some of this money to make sure you've got a really cozy bed with those satin sheets. That might also be for your woman, but I was quite a sensual 17-year-old. It's the adult that takes care of the teen. And the only reason your teen is thrashing is because they still think that they're the ones that have to be responsible for it. Yeah. I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Okay. I never handled anything as a teen. My mother always gave me everything, right? So some of you are going to be on the other side of the spectrum, and trust it is a spectrum. So we've got the hyper independent folks. You can raise your hand if you're hyper independent as a trauma response to life. And then we have the hyper codependent, right? Relying on parents to support us all the time. And then as we get older, we're like, fuck, the disillusionment comes. My parents aren't going to be there forever. And then you thrash about it. But I don't want to make money. I don't want to serve. Well, you have to worry about it. That's not your responsibility. That's me. That's me, the adult. The fully exalted version of me is not going to force you or exploit you to do things that aren't true. I'm going to show up. So it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on. Both sides have the same fucking result. They see a reality. They don't want to thrash against it because there isn't an adult showing up inside of you to take care of them otherwise. We have all the grace and all the reverence for spiritual adolescence. We're like, yeah, I got it that you're thrashing. It's fine. This is also why when I have clients who like get really angry and upset, I'm like, you could have your crazy. I'm cool with it. You can have your crazy all you want. And this is not going to change. So then you start to see that like it doesn't work. Right? It doesn't work to keep forcing your teen to be responsible for everything. You actually have to re-guide it. Now, in the last week and a half, I went back to British Columbia. I live in Montreal now. My parents are back in BC. And I finally got to address the thing that had started to stir in me 2 years ago about my parents' death. What ended up happening 2 years ago was I cried for like a week. I let myself grieve. And I let my inner teen be upset that any part of me had to be responsible for my parents. Right? Because at the same time, there was this belief that she didn't think my adult self should be responsible either. She has all these ideas. It's young, it's jovial, it's while it may feel mature, it's not. It's layered with trying to rescue people, trying to rescue myself. It just doesn't work. And there was just this one moment when I finally got to the bottom of the barrel of tears. I say, it doesn't matter how much I cry. This is still the reality I'm in. And I remember taking a big deep breath and I was like, what am I going to have to do to take care of me here in this reality that I'm in? And I got to the spot of realizing that I need to take out insurance policies on both of my parents. My inner teen thrashed against that too. I shouldn't have to fucking pay for this. That should be them. Like losing my mind. So I got crying again, getting upset, getting frustrated, finally get to the bottom of the barrel of the tears and full spot of acceptance. Okay, I've got to take out a policy against my parents. And I've got to pay for it. Fuck. There's no way in hell 2 years ago I could afford it. Life insurance policies, it's like a commitment that you're making for the next 30 years. I was like, okay, let's do this. And so a lot of what I focused on in my business was, what is it going to take for me to make the kind of money in my business to afford my parents' life insurance? There are so many people out here who are like, oh my God, what's it going to take for me to make the money in my business so I can afford the Louis shoes? And guess what? Congratulations, because your parents are still going to die. I know that's morbid, but like, you start to realize that the things that you want are rooted in ego rather than truth. Because if it's rooted in truth, it's still in alignment with the reality that you will be living in. Right? And so I started to realize all the things that I wanted got reorganized. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to have them. If you want the Louis shoes, go get the fucking Louis shoes, but it's going to get reorganized. Because it's in service to making sure all parts of me are taken care of. Buying the Louis shoes would not actually take care of my inner teen. Just like going to Six Flags would not necessarily take care of my inner child. But taking care of my inner child is also making sure she's fed every day. Taking care of my inner teen is making sure she's not worried about money. Trying to afford my parents' funerals. That's not something she needs to worry about, so I'm going to make sure I take care of it. It reorganizes your priorities because there's a deeper commitment to making sure that all parts of you are only responsible for what's appropriate for them to be responsible for. It's much easier to see how absolutely inappropriate it would be for a 7-year-old to worry about your money. The problem is with the adolescent, because it's just so much of a gray area. Well, they need to learn. Yeah. But until they're 18, they're still children. And until they're 25, their brain's still developing. So for those of you that are between the ages of 18 and 25, I'm so sorry. It's going to get a lot messier. It's just it's how it goes. You're not done. Your brain's not done even growing yet. The ego gets peaked at 25. Maybe or maybe not. But anyways, so I got to this place of acceptance of I need to be able to afford my parents' policies. And then slowly I would take care of other things. Like I needed to move to take care of me. I needed to eat better to take care of me. And then slowly but surely, even the need to pay for a policy on my parents started to move its way up the priority list because it actually got put on the list. So when I went back to BC this last week, I had already talked to my parents about it, about like, hey, I understand your guys' financial situation and I'm going to have to put a policy on both of you guys. At first, my dad was really upset. And when I first told him and he got upset, the thing that I thought he was upset about was the fact that like I was taking out a policy on his life. And like, I thought he was upset that felt like I was trying to have a payday on his like life. But what I found out this week was that he wasn't upset about that at all. He was upset because he felt like he failed me. A reality that his inner teen was also fighting against seeing. He has spent the last 30 years working his butt to the bone, making pennies on the dollar to try to do what's best for me, and it still wasn't good enough. me having to be responsible as an adult and respond to the reality of which he tried to get rid of, a reality he tried to change for me, broke his heart. It was when I showed up as an adult, I could actually see my dad as human. And I could recognize, yeah, his best wasn't good enough. But I'll be damned if I don't give him the grace that I know I'm going to need when my best is not good enough. Your inner adult is not meant to get it perfect. Your inner adult is just meant to respond to the realities you're in, even when they're painful, even when they're upsetting, even when they are drastically not what you want. So I sat inside the insurance office last week with my parents who are not together and who do not get along, which was shocking in itself. And I watched my dad drop further into the reality that needed him to respond to. And he told me I actually needed double the coverage I thought I needed for him. A deeply humbling moment for a man who has never showed a sign of weakness. And I looked at him and I also got really clear with the reality. And I said, Dad, I can't afford that. That level of insurance I wasn't prepared for. And maybe in a couple of years, my business will be able to sustain that, but I can't commit to that now. It would be too much stress on me. And he took a big deep breath and he said, I'm going to help you. He goes, I'm going to do what it takes to make sure that I can cover the difference. And I want you guys to really just acknowledge for a moment how impossible that kind of conversation would have been had I let my inner teen take control. There's so many ways that she would have responded. She would have never applied for the policy because she was rageful and so upset at her parents, and then have to eventually fork out the financial costs when they do die anyways, and then be resentful again while trying to grieve. Or maybe she would have gotten righteous and been like, I'm paying for this. It's fine. You failed me. And then my dad would have felt more like a failure and not been available for the relationship that we have now. Me taking care of my inner teen is not about being right or wrong. It's about understanding that she's always going to have these spots of hurt and she can feel them. But when I take care of her, that there's actually more space for people to relate to me, woman to man, woman to woman. Spiritual adolescence is a phase, but when you force yourself to be stuck there, you lose out on the adult life that you're actually meant to be living now. I've spent way too many years being upset and angry instead of allowing myself to step up and serve. And I serve regardless if I get paid. There's a reason why I'm doing 3 free complimentary transmissions of the freaking course that it costs pennies next month. Because if I don't serve this, then I'm still not taking care of her. If I don't serve in my business, no part of me is taken care of. No part of my life is going to feel smooth and juicy and flourishing. And if I don't focus on that, she ain't going to have any fun. The fact that we think that serving is this like tumultuous, painful, oh my God, martyred experience. And it's like, you show up to work, you serve. Let it be fun. Let it be ridiculous. Let it be insane. Let it be a joke almost, that your teenager's just like, I'm just fun. I just want to see what happens. Because again, your inner teen's responsible for discovery and curiosity. Yeah. So whether you have a job or whether you have an employment, let her discover, like, what happens if I just like laugh with this person? What happens if when I'm dealing with this like Karen-esque woman that I go, you know what? I get it. Let's see what we can do. Let your inner teen be responsible for just the game of life. Like, let's just see what the fuck happens, knowing that your adult will clean up whatever does. That whatever reality your inner teen gets you into, that your adult is always responding to it. Yeah? I'm going to read some of the comments here. This feels complex to me, like there are levels, there's hyper independence in some ways and co in others. Absolutely. That's also normal, right? That's the thrashing that I refer to with our inner teens. Like codependent in this way, hyper independent in that way. It's all compensatory. It's just trauma responses. So it really doesn't matter which one you have. It's just a spectrum. Okay, great. So obviously this conversation is a much bigger one that is taking place in January in my first evergreen program called the Piggy Bank. The Piggy Bank is 4 modules and 5 calls. If you actually join in January, you'll be participating in the 5 live calls. If you join thereafter, you'll get the replays. But this entire container is in service to responsibility and reverence, just like Bank is, because it is the introduction to Bank. It is the introduction to financial intimacy. But the reason why it's an introduction is because what I realized is in my membership container Bank, there was this intensity everyone was bringing. When I first released the program, Bank was very clear. We do not need to add intensity. People will bring it themselves. It was like the first transmission that I got. And then I was like, why is there so much intensity? Why are people dying in this container? Like there's nothing to die about. And what I realized is that there was this level where the inner teenager was still the one controlling this like survivorship. And so that level of intense surviving was like infiltrating into Bank. And so then I was constantly having to address this like, well, how do I survive this? And how do I survive that? Blah, blah, blah. And so then Bank got intense. If you remember in Bank, you've probably seen the 13 modules and the 5 videos that are per module and like the 8 lessons. Like it just got so crazy. And I was like, this isn't it. Like this isn't what this work's about. Reverence and responsibility is like simple. It's sweet. It's like this juicy, salivating, fresh, citrusy feel. It's the clicking of heels down an empty corridor. It's just elegantly smooth. And I was like, I gotta strip this. And so I was like, what the fuck is the problem? And I realized I was like, oh, okay. So I got to address all of these inner teens who think that wealth can't be fun and wealth can't be enjoyable. And that like, even when you discover a problem, that's also really hot for a teenager. Teenagers love drama. Yeah. So when your inner teen discovers a problem, rather than letting them be weighted by it, let them be in the energy of discovery with it, curiosity, right? And so across these 4 modules, we're going to look at things like your expenses, your income, your savings, and your credit cards, because those are just the 4 main topics. And yeah, it'll be an intro, and yeah, it won't cover everything, and that is fine. Although I'm going to have some personal boundaries because I like to give a lot. Because I want you to understand that there is no sacrifice when it comes to wealth, despite popular opinion. That you can afford to live your life. And how you do that is by making sure all parts of you are taken care of, but that you are constantly responding to the reality you're in. The reality you're in is that your credit card's maxed out. We gotta look at that. The reality that you're in is that you got 18 fraudulent charges on your card. We gotta look at that. The reality is that you're spending more than you make. We gotta look at that. If the reality you're in is that you're not making anything, we gotta look at that too. Because none of that is your teenager's responsibility. So it doesn't matter what your teenager thinks. But we do need to take care of them in the process of learning how to respond. In the process of being messy with our responses, because we don't know everything. Right? So For those of you watching the replay, I'm going to end it here. For those of you that are here live, we're going to move over to the Q&A session. Yes, I don't include those in replay. But if this is something that you want to explore, if it's something you're ready to join, I highly encourage you doing that. You can pay in full. Program is $333 Canadian, or you can pay that across 3 payments for $111 Canadian for 3 months. I don't care. You do what works for you. You do what feels true and right. If you're already in bank, shush your face. You're already getting the container anyway. But you're welcome to enroll at your free will. If you're like, I have some questions and I want to chat with you, we can book a call. I have no problem with that too. The start date. Thank you. So we start January 12th. The calls are kind of scattered to try to get people in different time zones. So if you can't make a call, it's no big deal. You're going to get the replay anyways. You'll have like unlimited coaching while in the container, and you'll have access to the container for 60 days. So it's plenty of time to move through things. The course itself is only about a month, but you'll have access to working everything for those 60 days. What else? Yeah. And then, so depending on when you sign up today or you sign up tomorrow, you'll be invited to Unearth, my private Mighty network, right off the bat. And from there, you'll get access to all of my public content that we have discussions around inside of the container. So that's like there's no incentive for joining early. If you want to wait it out, do you? But I'm going to end that here. So for those of you watching the replay, I'd love to know what you're leaving here with in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you in the container.